Chapter 14. To the End of Darkness. 126 horses pounded their hooves toward the vast darkness of the foul land that loomed ahead, with me at the forefront. I didn't have the same fear I had had before, though I knew we were heading towards certain death. We would fight and die together, and it felt reassuring in a way. Redorick rode closest to me. Gattling was at his side, just like Baden was at Roald's side. Lukas had kept close to Flint, who was riding a pony, while the elves and that single dwarf brought up the rear. Lightkeepers and veteran warriors were the bulk of the army, mostly men but some women as well. Aundria was amongst the leaders, riding right behind Baden. We began riding faster toward the darkness, and the ghouls that lingered on the path scattered away from us as our horses blew past them. Whatever other foulness that would have been in our path had dissipated, making way to the light that broke through, blazing forward with determination. We finally stopped at the black gates of the dark citadel, in front of those menacingly large fortifications. Most of the lightkeepers had never seen those gates, some terror-stricken by the sheer size of it. In all their days patrolling, they took special measures to keep a great distance from it, for merely seeing the black gates meant seeing your death, as one militiaman attested. We watched the walls, but there were no guards on top of them, nor was anything flying overhead. No enemy was awaiting us. The utter silence that ensued while we observed was only disrupted by the occasional horses as they snorted and neighed.
Did they not see us? Did they not hear us?
Asked Roald as he watched the black gates.
I will not be made a fool. Load the catapults. Let's bring down those walls.
Several catapults that were with us were loaded, and at Roald's command the rocks were fired at the wall. As they struck the walls, they had it crashed into smithereens, not even denting it in the slightest. At that very moment, many shadow demons emerged from the sky above the dark keep. Many lightkeepers immediately readied their bows, but the shadow demons, they did not attack. Instead, they landed on the battlements and watched us.
What are they doing? What are they waiting for?
Asked Gattling as he observed the demons.
Aim at the foul beings! Fire!
Yelled Roald. Archers and catapults sent their projectiles toward the shadow demons, hitting a few of them that fell from the wall, but several others immediately flew in from above to replace them. Roald looked at Baden in bewilderment.
Why aren't they attacking?
But Baden didn't answer.
They're trying to avoid battle,
interrupted Redorick matter-of-factly.
Why?
Redorick didn't answer. He looked at me instead. They know that this is our entire army, I said. Killing all of us together wouldn't mean victory for them. They feed from the conflict between light and darkness, not from total annihilation. Roald looked at the shadow demons. They did not move a muscle as they sat there like gargoyle statues, blending to the shade of the wall.
We will not have it so,
said Roald.
They will fight us to the death whether they want it or not.
He trotted ahead with his horse, then turned to look at us and the rest of the army.
Warriors of the Citadel, do you wish to waste away your days in the Light Keep? Is that how you want to be remembered? As time-worn men and women who lived out their lives under a great shadow, forever under the gaze of the looming darkness? Or do you want to hold your sword high and proud, curse away that fear in our hearts, light the darkness with our fire, and charge at the black gates of hell? For that is what I shall do. Are you with me?
Yeah!
He clanged his sword against the shield. At once, the rest of the Lightkeepers, including myself, clanged all our weapons in agreement.
If it means our death, let it mean our death,
added Roald, his voice hoarse and cracking, but strong and reverberating.
Today is the retribution of our enemies. Ere we die, we shall give them the wrath of the righteous. Drive your blades to the skies, and rain your steels with death upon the hell spawns.
Loud battle cries sounded off. We all held our swords high, ignited for battle.
Catapults! Archers! Fire!
cried Roald. More firepower hit the black gates. Many more boulders crashed into the wall, while arrows were fired at the shadow demons. Some of the shadow demons were hit and fell from the hail of arrows and rocks.
Fight us!
Screamed Roald toward the dark keep.
Fight us!
The earth shook and all the shadow demons on the walls scattered away. A booming roar echoed from the sky, and we all turned our gaze upwards as the mist began to clear, giving way to something huge and full of malice. Indeed, a large armored black dragon emerged from above. We all held up our shields, ready for whatever would come. It was Murdoch, the Dark Lord's dragon, and it landed hard on top of the black gates, crashing some of the shadow demons along with some of the battlemented stones. On the top of the dragon sat none other but the Dark Lord himself, his eyes burning red with anger.
Why did you come?
The Dark Lord's voice sheared through the Lightkeepers.
To banish darkness from these lands forevermore,
answered Roald, stepping forward.
We will cower in the keep no longer.
Darkness can never be vanquished. You have no chance of victory. Turn back to your little fort now, for you will be given no more chances.
Roald glanced over at me and Redorick and to his entire army. The sheer shock on his face told the tale of a man who had been deceived for a long time. The Light Keep was never a holy barrier as he thought it was. He looked back at his nemesis.
We will not
go back.
Boomed loudly the Dark Lord, and dragon roared, light glowing in its stomach, fire emerging from its glutterous.
Shields!
Yelled Roderick. The dragon spat a fireball. We prepared for the worst as the fireball smashed into the ground and exploded right in front of us, sending stones from the ground our way. I held the shield at my face as the stones came crashing into them. When I lowered my shield, I saw Roald with his shield down, his body slightly scorched, and he was riding to where the fireball hit, which left a crater. Roald looked at the crater, then looked up at the dragon.
We are finally outside the walls of the Light Keep, and you bid us to turn back? You will not use this chance to fight? What is the meaning of this mockery?
You are alive because I choose to keep you alive. Your fate of life and death is mine to decide.
No longer. We've taken our fate into our own hands. We want war, and we shall fight till the last Lightkeeper.
I would have let you live, but fools like you only know the value of water until the well is empty. If this is what you desire, then I guarantee you your death. Your death too. Madrien.
He glared at me. Redorick placed his hand on my shoulder at that moment. The Dark Lord's eyes flared. The Lightkeepers held their shields up, ready for another ball of fire. But instead the dragon flapped its wings and flew up into the sky and the darkness that it contained. No one spoke a word. We all waited for the next Delray. Breaking the quiet which ensued, a large mechanism thundered. The two colossal mechanical figures by the black walls had put their axes down to the earth, and the great black gates slowly creaked open. We wasted no time galloping inside the Dark Keep. Roald first, me by his side, and the Lightkeepers behind, going through the ruins, through the Valley of Shadows and broken memories. Many of the Lightkeepers were awestruck, particularly the veterans, as it revealed what they hadn't seen in a very long time, the ruins of their old city. Many of the younger Lightkeepers had never seen the city before at all, only heard it in stories, were looking about in veneration of the past. But there was no time to reminisce. The horses were getting anxious. Many of them neighed loudly and dropped off their riders, turned around and fled. As we came around the last bits of ruins, the hellish, ashen plains unfolded before us, and upon these plains we had witnessed the full scale of the infinite army of the darkness. Thousands of orcs standing in formation, and shadow demons were flying in the dark clouds above them. We knew we were headed towards death. Drums began sounding off.
Let them come,
spat Gattling.
Let those bastards come.
He clanged his sword with his shield madly. A deep horn blew loudly that reverberated all across the Darklands. The orcs were beginning their charge. I took several steps forward, tightening the grip of the hilt of my sword. "Stay back," I declared to all the rest of the Lightkeepers.
What are you doing?
Asked Roald. Baden and Gattling were also baffled and came to stop me.
Let her be,
said Redorick. Roald, after exchanging glances with Redorick, nodded to Baden, who then shouted the command.
Hold your ground, Lightkeepers! Stay still!
Nobody moved. I ran toward the charging army of orcs all by myself. The ground was shaking at my feet the more the horde of orcs had gotten closer and closer. Death was about to mercilessly ram into me, yet before they met me, I swirled the sword in my hands and pierced it mightily into the ground. Immediately a blast of blue light exploded. Hundreds of charging orcs had been blasted up into the air. Bursts of cheers emerged from behind me, which I could hear faintly over the quaking earth as the infinite army of darkness kept charging into a second wave.
Charge!
Yelled Roald.
To battle!
Cried Baden. I got up, and with the Lightkeepers behind me, and I ran toward the army of darkness. I would be the first in the charge of the army of light. Thus the forces of light clashed against the forces of darkness. Shields and swords bashed together. Feeling the adrenaline of battle, I managed to put my sword through a few orcs, spinning and slashing. It was exhilarating. It was more than exhilarating. It felt right. It felt good. I don't ever remember being so excited in my life. I had killed dozens, if not more, each time my sword going in deeper. Then somehow, in the chaos of it all, among the clangs of metal, the arrows that flew about, and the battle cries, I felt metal inside me, ripping me away. It didn't appear to be the Dark Lord's weapon. No, nor was it Sebastianus or anyone noteworthy that had challenged me before. Just a random orc, a random death, on random location, on the battlefield. Everything became dark. Dark still. I refused to believe it was the end. I stayed as long as I could. I even took the VR off for a moment and tried putting it back on. Still dark. I guess it really is over. My character was dead. Somehow, I felt my heart aching that moment. Not because I was stabbed in the virtual world, but because I had lost Madrien. My connection with her was gone. Even though her only purpose was to find Isabella, I suddenly felt like there was more to her. More to me. She was me in that world, a reflection of who I am. I got up and started pacing around the room. I wish I was still there, alive. I wish I could still help them. I kind of wish we had won. How petty does that sound? What's going on in there? Should I call Callum? I lied on Josh's bed and stared at the ceiling. It was so strange. One moment I was on a battlefield fighting orcs and demons. Now I'm just a single woman lying on a single bed, looking up at the ceiling. How depressing. I pulled the VR close to me, looked at it and took a deep breath. I could only imagine what's still going on there. Gattling and Baden standing back to back. Roald showing he's not just a leader, but a fighter. Flint proving it's not about size. And Aundria showing them proper fighting maneuvers. I imagined the elves would be knocking down all the shadowy demons with their bows and arrows, and Callum, or Redorick I should say, is definitely kicking ass too, probably killing more than the rest of them. I sighed. I can only imagine now. I guess. You should have seen your mother, Josh. You should have seen your mother. I smiled to myself, thinking. He wouldn't have believed it if I told him.
Madrien?
I heard a voice faintly echoing from the VR. Chapter 15. Lukas.
Madrien?
The voice said again, faintly echoing from the VR. I put the VR headset on again. Everything was black, but I could somehow see my hands. I was in the game, it seemed, but not in the battle. Hello? I asked. Can you hear me?
Yes, hello. I've been waiting for a long time to speak with you. Can you please tell me what is your name in real life?
It's Melinda. Who am I talking to?
I'm Lukas. It's nice to meet you, Melinda. I've been watching you for a while now.
You've been watching me?
Yes, I can see everyone and everything, the past and the present.
Are you the owner of this world?
Yes. Well, the current owner, that is. The original owner passed away. He was the creator of this world. I just keep the show running. Wait, let me make the environment a bit more hospitable for you.
A tree appeared, fading into the blackness. At first it was a birch tree, Then it disappeared, and a pine tree appeared instead. Then a palm tree, and eventually an oak tree, as though he had full control of all the objects in the world, like he was scrolling which type of object to put. He then created several oak trees around me, and even added a wooden chair in the middle. There, please sit. Nervous as I was, I sat down. So you can do anything here?
Yes, and my powers are not only limited to objects.
And for a split second, a giant walked by and vanished. Then a colossal bright golden dragon flew above me and disappeared into a million little pieces that merged into blackness. Are you the Dark Lord? I asked.
No.
Why have you been watching me?
I believe I owe you an answer to this question, and I've been waiting for a while to tell you. Your journey was most curious to me. You spoke with such passion, you moved with such a drive that I couldn't stop watching you. Can you tell me why you started this journey? Why have you come into this game world looking for Isabella?
Isabella was played by my son Josh. He died while playing here.
He died? How?
I don't know. Nobody knows. His heart gave way, I told him, unable to contain my emotions. I was hoping to somehow find answers by looking into this world, understanding how Isabella died here. Maybe to find some sort of closure. That's why I came.
I'm so terribly sorry to hear this. This world never meant to kill anyone in real life. Isabella meant so much for this world that I can't even imagine what this loss means to you.
Thank you, Lukas. I'm glad to meet you. You're my last hope of making sense in all this. Can you please help me understand what's going on? Who's the Dark Lord if it's not you? Why did Isabella have to die?
Well, I will tell you of the events that led to her death. I insist you sit down for this.
I walked back to the chair and sat down.
It all started with my father, Sergei. He would spend nights on end in front of his computer with one goal: to create a virtual world that would be as real as those worlds that he read about in those fantasy books or watch in movies. He wanted to feel he's truly inside that world and that nothing would break this immersion. And no other game has given him that feeling. So nights on end he would perfect his code and script the most complex systems imaginable that would describe the behavior of species, seasons and weather, trees and plants. Then he would watch how this world come to life, the god of his own creation. He gave himself an avatar and began immersing in it as the sole wanderer of this world. While he enjoyed his own creation, there was something missing in all of that that even he couldn't deny. An ingredient of true life. People, human beings, players. It was the one thing he couldn't quite script, no matter how hard he tried. I suppose that's the wonderful thing about us. We're complex, emotional, and unpredictable.
You cannot script a human being, I said.
Well, he couldn't. So he invited people to his fantasy world, with one major rule of not letting real life cross into the game world. He was very strict about it. He didn't want anyone even poking at the carefully woven fabric of reality that he had so diligently worked to create. Every player was obliged to stay in character all the time, never mention anything from the real world, and to glue it all this realism together was permadeath. Just like in real life, you can only be one person, and death is permanent. If you die, you'd be gone from the world forever. He had even mentioned in his writings that without feeling death is real, how can life feel real? So permadeath was a way to breathe in realism into the world and maintain the balance. Since it wasn't about money, he wasn't worried about how people would react in losing their characters. That's what made the world different. Players were beginning to flock into his world exactly because of that reason, because it dared to be different. It wasn't afraid to be hardcore, to treat death as permanent, even for the players he liked the most. Some players would die just because they were simply at the wrong place at the wrong time. That was life, sometimes random and unpredictable. The players knew what they were signing up for. It made it more real for them. My father never asked for money. What was important for him is quality of the players, not their quantity. So he made it free, and made sure only the players who respect his world stay, and those who don't were banned forever. Sadly, this is where the tale takes a sad and dark turn. A few years ago, my father was then diagnosed with cancer. Before he died, he trusted his game world to several people, the Dungeon Masters. These were in fact several players who were there from the inception of his world. He would talk to them often, even interview them, and made sure they understand what it means to maintain the balance. Eventually, he gave them that power, but he wasn't sure how much power should he give them. He was tweaking it every day. It was the one thing my dad couldn't finish beta testing before he died. He just hoped he made the right decision before he passed away. But, as it turned out, he gave them too much power. And since humans are easily corrupted, the Dungeon Masters began eroding at the gentle balance my dad so meticulously tried to create. They lusted more and more power, and my dad's world allowed them to gain it. Players hated the Dungeon Masters who acted as petty gods. They believed the game would be better without them. Yet there was nothing they could do. Except maybe there was. You see, my dad had left one more trick before he left. In order to maintain the balance, even the Dungeon Masters were held to the rule of Permadeath. Since Dungeon Masters enacted their power through their characters, so my father had set forth that if their character dies, they die too. That's where your son comes into the story, Melinda. Can you even imagine what Isabella actually did? Something that shook this entire game world upside down. She began killing the very Dungeon Masters of this world. She was the only character strong enough to challenge them. One by one, they fell to her sword.
So that's what the Dark Lord meant when he said she killed those who she was never meant to kill.
Yes, until the rest of the Dungeon Masters united against Isabella, the last remaining 3. They wanted to kill who they called the DM Killer, and eventually, with their combined forces, they managed to do just that. She didn't truly have a chance. She had killed 2 Dungeon Masters in the process, but the last Dungeon Master, the strongest of them all, survived. He's the one you know as the Dark Lord.
Why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you help her?
I tried. I did. I warned her. But that was more or less all I could do. I couldn't quite understand my father's code back then. It was complex, and I have no background in programming. I wish I could have helped her. I was so upset that I couldn't do more. You see, after my dad died, I didn't know anything about his game world. He was quite a loner. Before he died, he inherited his game world to me, telling me to keep the server running, no matter what. It was his only wish. He even put it in his will. That's how much he cared for it. It was his legacy. So at first, I just kept the server running as he asked me to. But then, I started looking inside it, and I began to understand what it was all about. I was in awe at what my father was able to create through his madness. I logged into the world through my dad's account, and I could see every place in the game world, follow every character. Isabella immediately drew my attention, so I've created an avatar in order to interact with her. You know him as Skyel.
Skyel, we've met.
Yes, we have. Though Isabella knew a somewhat younger incarnation of him. She understood who I really was behind my avatar, and also understood my limitations, that I didn't have any physical influence in the world, but she had. She was my conduit in the game world, so I would tell her information that I didn't tell any other player, information that I felt vital to the survival of the game world. That information helped her kill the first Dungeon Master, and gave her the courage to begin killing others.
So without you...
She wouldn't have been as daring. I'm sorry, Melinda. I didn't know. I didn't know it would have this effect on him.
It's okay. I know you didn't know. No one could have. You said that she understood you really were. Did you ever speak out of character?
Yes. Only once. I had told him about my father, and he thanked me for carrying out my dad's tradition.
Did Josh ever happen to tell you anything about himself in that conversation? Anything personal?
Yes. He told me he feels more alive and true to his real gender identity in this world.
So it's true. He wanted to be a woman.
Yes, you didn't know?
I suspected it, I just didn't know for sure.
Well, the Haze is a lot of things for a lot of different people. I believe for people like Josh, it lets them explore who they truly are, or who they wish to present themselves as. Often, we can't be who we want in real life. Even something simple like being gay we need to hide. In my home country, it's practically against the law. Somehow, the basic golden rule of live and let live doesn't always apply. And people have to truly live in the shadows because of that. Deny themselves, or even be in denial of their true selves.
I wish Josh didn't have to die. I would have helped him. I would have supported him. I started crying, dropping to my knees. I'd have given him my makeup if he asked.
You didn't know any better, Melinda. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backward. You're not at fault. You actually did something quite amazing when you came into the game the first time. I was watching you. I didn't quite understand what made you shout and scream the first time, but instead of banning you, I decided to give you a second chance in the Temple of Light, to learn exactly who you are. It took you 3 weeks to come back, but you eventually logged back in. You had such drive to find Isabella, so I followed you.
Yes, I said, wiping a few tears. Josh drew me a map. He wanted me to find his items.
You mean where you were digging?
Yes, you saw me?
Of course. There was nothing there.
What?
The place you were digging. There was nothing there. I put those items there.
No, they can't be. Josh drew it on a map for me.
Are you sure?
Yes, it had an X marking the spot.
Did it?
Yes, it did. I snapped the VR off, grabbed the sketchbook, and looked at Josh's drawing again. Was it an X? Or was it just some lines? An illusion? Holy hells! He was right! It was not an X. There was nothing there, just stones that laid there that seemed like an X. Did I see what I wanted to see? I quickly strapped the VR on again.
Melinda, I saw you digging there. There was so much passion about you with respect to Isabella. So I decided to give you her old items and see the drama unfold.
You mean you knew that would happen?
Of course.
But the letter. Josh wrote such an emotional letter.
I wrote it.
It was written as though Josh did, I said with a tinge of reproach.
I'm sorry. I know that's what you want to believe. I didn't know who you were at that time. But now that I do, then please, let me show you into the past. Let me show you Isabella's last moments.
A vision then started playing. It was like watching a movie. Demons were chasing Isabella throughout the entire land. She ran as far as she could through forests, wastelands, and mountains, until she reached a lone temple in the peak of a mountain. She pushed open the doors and saw Skyel there in meditation. He got up and turned to Isabella.
You have set in motion the Armageddon of this world, Isabella.
Then let this world die and perish. It will rebuild itself anew, ever stronger and better than before. Even if it takes eons, let the demigods vanish in all eternity, into the very nothingness that awaits them. My blade is coated with their blood. Now others know that we can defeat them. Now we know that they are not immortals.
Without you, Isabella, all hope shall vanish.
You can help us, Skyel. You can bring an end to this.
Maybe one day I could, but not today.
Darkness began overshadowing the sanctuary.
The end is coming,
said Skyel, glancing up to the sides.
They are here.
Isabella held the hilt of her sword. Skyel put his hand on her wrist to prevent Isabella from drawing out the sword.
Let us pray first.
To whom? There are no gods left.
Take a moment to yourself before the end. Feel the calm before the storm. Embrace what you are about to do. Be sure of your decision.
I am sure.
Please, take a moment. Do it for me if for no one else.
Reluctantly, Isabella knelt next to Skyel. Closing her eyes and palming her hands in deep meditation, Skyel did the same. There was an eerie silence for a while.
I may not be able to help you fight them,
But I can transfer you to another place in Limbo, that much I can do. You will be forever protected there against the evils that haunt you. It is a sanctuary beyond time.
No, I can't keep running. This is not who I am. I won't have my history besmirched by cowardice. Not as my final action. I shan't live in Limbo until the threat goes away. I must go out and meet them. I will take the hero's death. This is the only path for me. Make this world better, Skyl. Only you can now.
Isabella got up and drew her sword. She opened the doors to the monastery. All manners of hellspawn had gathered outside, an eternal army of harbingers of death, standing, waiting for her. Demons from all planes of hell. Isabella charged toward them. In that slaughter that followed, she had killed so many of them, her skills, strength, and speed seemingly inhuman. The fight seemed to be going on forever, yet at the end of the battle, the Dark Lord stared at her dying body on the ground. It was the very same image that I saw on my ceiling, only now I saw it from another perspective. Then he pierced his sword into Isabella, killing her, as he reached his black metallic gauntlet to grab her body. Isabella suddenly disappeared. The Dark Lord immediately looked up and saw Skyl.
You should not have intervened,
said the Dark Lord.
You should never intervene in our affairs. You're not but an observer.
I will intervene as I see fit.
Bring her back. Her body will be displayed for my army to see.
No, you shall not have her body.
This is not the way it's intended to be. The Lightkeepers shall suffer for your decision, Skyl. The world will suffer.
She was fighting them for days, Melinda. She wouldn't stop, and I couldn't do anything. It wasn't fair. She was but one. They were infinite. I think that's what killed him, and in turn Isabella, was that he didn't want to log off because he knew it would mean certain death for her. So he was trapped.
I understand now. My eyes welled up. I understand. He would have done anything to keep her Isabella alive, even if it cost him his life. I closed my eyes.
The only thing I knew how to do back then is to teleport people from one place to another. But since Josh didn't want Isabella teleported away to safety as long as she was alive, I only teleported Isabella when she died, when it was too late.
Thank you for showing me that. I now understand everything a lot better than I did before.
There is one more thing I want to show you.
The trees and the chair disappeared.
Turn around.
Light emerged to a square shape from a dark stone wall. It was a door which moved aside to reveal a bright threshold. I walked carefully toward it, peering inside. My heart skipped a beat. Inside the chamber, lying on a slate of stone, was a red-haired woman's body. I walked over there with scared and shaky steps. It was her. Isabella. It was bizarre, surreal. Looking at her was like watching through my son's true life and death. She looked serene, asleep, lifeless. She was so beautiful, even in death. I touched her hand. I couldn't help but shedding tears. My God, Joshua, Isabella, my sweetheart. I held her hand. I'm here. I made it all the way to you. Can you believe it? My gosh, you're so beautiful. You're like I imagine you to be. Like in your drawing. I sighed with joy. Like you imagined yourself to be. I caressed her hands, her cheeks. I might have shed a few tears on her before gently kissing her on the forehead. My final goodbye. At least, it was supposed to be. But it was then that Isabella's eyes came open. I slid back away and fell down from the sheer shock and disbelief. I might have even fainted for a split second. Did she just open her eyes? Or did I imagine it? Her hands were beginning to move. I froze. She was getting up. I shakily got up at the same time. She looked at me.
Madrien, thank you for carrying my light to the end of darkness.
It can't be. No, it can't be. Make it stop. Make it stop. It doesn't make sense anymore. Nothing makes sense. You're supposed to be dead. You're supposed to be dead.
You came all this way to find me, but you're disappointed to find me alive.
Because I know you're not, Josh, I yelled. Isabella froze in time. I heard Lucas's voice then.
No, she's not.
What's going on, Lucas?
I embodied Isabella.
Why? I screamed. Are you trying to fuck with me? I thought you were a good person.
I did not do it to confuse you, but I think you deserve a greater sense of closure. We both do.
How?
Well, as we speak, this world is dying. A war between light and darkness wages on. I now know that I am powerful enough now to defeat the Dark Army. I could spawn dragons to burn them, and giants to crash them, I suppose. But then I'd be making up creatures out of thin air, and that wouldn't make much sense. And if I were to do that, it would dishonor the rules my father has set forth. That would defeat the purpose of this game world and disrespect the players. The way I see it, Isabella is the best option. She didn't deserve to die. I mean to do what I should have done a long time ago. I mean to intervene as her. I will join the fight as Isabella.
Wait, but if Isabella died, you will break the rule of permadeath. That would mean that you'd be breaking the golden rule of this entire game world. It doesn't bother you? You said it yourself. You don't want to disrespect the players.
No, the Lightkeepers just think she's dead. They hadn't seen her body. So the rule of permadeath will not be broken in their minds. After all, if you didn't see it, it didn't happen.
But the Dark Lord saw her death. He killed her. You just showed me that.
Yes, you're right. But he is the only one who saw her die. And I don't care much for him nor what he thinks of my world, for he is a greedy, power-hungry, petty person. Isabella was the only thing that could have stopped him. I just wish it had turned out differently then. But I will make sure things turn out differently now. With your permission, Isabella will now return to the land of the living.
Isabella's head moved slightly, clenching a fist. Can she defeat all the Dark Army by herself?
Melinda, however strong was Isabella before, she is now 1,000 times stronger.
Isabella approached me and reached out her hand. Fearfully not knowing exactly what was about to occur, I reached out mine. As our fingers touched, I felt tingly sensation in my body, as though something magical was happening. I was disappearing, my body disintegrating away, transforming itself inside Isabella. I could see through her eyes. Lucas's voice then echoed these last words.
Josh may be dead, but Isabella shall live through us. She will prove that she is the greatest warrior to ever live in the final battle of mankind.
Chapter 16. Retribution. Somewhere in what appeared to be a cave, Isabella strapped herself in her old armor and red cloak, gauntlets and bracers, shoulder pads and boots. But she did not wear a helmet, nor bothered with a shield. No, they should see her face. She twirled her sword in her hand, which shone with old elven runes, but she sheathed it for now, her eyes looking up at that tiny speck of light, the exit of the limbo which flickered above her. She walked up the stone stairs that led her to an exit from that hidden place. As she passed through some portal, some unseen barrier, she was then back in the land of the living. The very air seemed foul and full of fire, sparks, and smoke. She took several more steps and stood on the dark cliff. Standing on the ledge, she then saw the entire great, vile, infinite army of darkness. It was an army of orcs until the eye could see, and other foul hell spawns amongst them. with shadow demons flying overhead. Far off, at the other side of which was a tiny speck of light, these were the Lightkeepers, holding off the Dark Army as they were fighting for dear life. Isabella took a few steps back, clenched her jaw, then jumped off the cliff. She landed on her feet in the midst of the orcs, who stepped back from the shock, looking confused at her, looking confused at each other, not sure how to react to that. Some knew who she was. Their eyes immediately betrayed their fear. Wasn't she supposed to be dead? They were too afraid to make the first move. Sigmund pushed his way through the crowd of orcs, and then saw who it was. He paled. Isabella tightened the grip of her sword, a steely gaze in her eyes. The orcs charged forth, but all they had seen when they met her was the flicker from her sword, and it sent the orcs to their dismembered death. As all her attackers lay dead, Sigmund's eyes suddenly became red. His tongue became longer. He was beginning to transform into something. He grew much larger, demonic wings sprouting from his back. He became so transfigured that nothing about him was symmetrical. His rib cage exposed, and his spikes seemed to be projecting from his stomach. He became into a sort of unworldly demon. Isabella ran toward him so fast the demon couldn't react fast enough, and her sword went through its demonic rib cage and cut it in half. Immediately as that happened, the demon transformed back into Sigmund's lifeless body. Deirdra came to see what the fuss was all about, and in the shock of seeing Isabella and Sigmund's dead body, she started pacing back. "You should be dead," she screamed. No, it's not possible." Deirdra turned around and fled, but Isabella had met on the very side she was fleeing to, and pierced her sword deep into Deirdre's heart, whose eyes reddened in disbelief, as Isabella was the last thing she saw before she perished. As Isabella looked up, she saw a great shadow demon diving toward her, the very one that killed Barudark. Sebastiania, standing far away in the vantage point on a command tower that was overlooking the battle, did not notice what was happening on his right side, as he was focused on looking ahead to see the Lightkeepers obliterated. An orc came running by.
Isabella, alive!
Sebastianius perked an eyebrow.
Isabella, alive? These are some hefty hallucinations, Grunt. Smoking that thing Sigmund has been handing out?
Another orc came running by. In his hands he held a large horn that he dropped to the ground.
Is that Baphael's horn?
Asked Sebastianius with a frown, as he indeed recognized the great shadow demon's horn.
She kills it! She kills Sigmund! She kills Deirdra! She are coming for yous!
Sebastianius squinted as he saw something in the distance, something that seemed to be killing all the orcs in its path. As the dark red hair came out of the shadows and into the lights, he saw her. It was indeed Isabella. Sebastianius looked more confused than shocked, as if he wanted to know who screwed that kill job, but it was his master's kill job, the Dark Lord's himself.
How is such a thing possible?
He looked at the orcs.
What are you waiting for? What are you standing here for like morons? Attack! Kill her!
Some orcs remained in their places, yet some dared to charge at her, but her speed didn't seem human. She was but a blur when she moved. Her sword would go through the orcish armors as if it was a piece of cloth, and every time she hit, it would seem to be exactly where she intended the strike to be. Blood spurting and bodies falling. All the orcs lay dead around her.
Attack!
Sebastianius kept yelling at the other orcs who stood still, witnessing the slaughter, not wanting to attack her.
You worthless scums!
Said Sebastianius, and sliced off the head of one of the spectating orcs. The other orcs who saw that simply fled. Isabella stood still now as Sebastianius turned toward her.
How did you come back?
Fear in his voice. She did not answer.
Why aren't you talking? Why aren't you saying anything?
Isabella began walking toward him, like a speechless executioner.
Very well.
He aimed his sword at Isabella, pretending to have overcome his fear.
We killed you before. We can kill you again.
Sebastianius ran toward Isabella and swung at her. She parried his attack with ease and pushed him back, a clear taunt. She then paced forward and swung at him so fast that Sebastianius barely managed to parry the hit and stay on his feet. Isabella swung even harder and faster. Sebastianius somehow managed to parry yet again, but fell to the ground from the force of the hit. He quickly scrambled to get up.
If I won't kill you,
He will kill you.
With her third swing, Isabella broke Sebastianus' sword, and her blade went right through his armor and into his heart, then quickly pulled the sword out. Sebastianus fell to the ground, in his defeat, dead. As the forces of light managed to fend off the darkness and stay alive a little longer than any of them hoped, the Dark Lord himself had swooped low on top of his dragon, grabbing the helpless Lightkeepers and their horses and tossed them away. Among the toss was Roald, who lied on the earth, bleeding heavily and unmoving, though still alive. In the dragon's second go-around, he swooped lower still, incinerating several Lightkeepers with his fiery breath and crashing into a whole host of them with his deadly claws. The dragon took its giant steps toward the remaining army of the Lightkeepers, with the clear intent to burn them all. But then, the Dark Lord's eyes flashed in wonder, and even his very dragon froze in action. Something interrupted everyone. It made all the Lightkeepers turn their heads, even the injured, the dying, who lied on the ground. They were all dumbfounded, shell-shocked at what they were seeing. It can't be. Some of the Lightkeepers suddenly began kneeling. Some took off their helmets. Some just stared as awe transformed their faces. Whatever orcs were there were fleeing away. Roald's jaw went slack. He couldn't believe his eyes. Baden dropped his shield to the ground. Flint and Ludic were mesmerized, frozen in half motion in whatever they were doing. Gattling's eyes lit up completely. A hand clenched at his heart respectfully, bowing his head. Redorick looked completely bewildered and astonished, to the point of dropping his sword. Aundria stood frozen, awestruck. Her whole face lit up brighter than anyone else's. It was Isabella, the red-headed warrior, a swagger in her stride, a steely glaze in her eyes, and a deadly spunk painted on her face. She twirled her sword as if she owned the battlefield, glaring at her arch-nemesis. As she began to pick up speed, she blazed through the battlefield toward him. The Dark Lord overcame his initial shock, and his giant dragon lunged at Isabella, mouth wide open, ready to snap her to pieces. It would seem that Isabella would go right into the beast's mouth, but then she disappeared as the dragon snapped his jaw at her. She became but a streak of blurry blue lines that then reappeared in front of the Dark Lord and struck her sword through his armor and deep into his heart. As the dragon flew away, Isabella and the Dark Lord slid off the dragon's tail onto the ground, with Isabella's sword still embedded inside him. She stared at him for a good while as he laid there on the ground. Vengeance and retribution flickered in her eyes, while her sword went deeper still into his dark soul. He was beginning to disintegrate. A great thunderstorm from the sky then erupted, and everything evil began rising up in circles. The demons, the orcs, the Dark Keepers, all of them were now in the air, being swallowed upwards by the great spiraling storm. Even the very land was being uprooted by the storm. Trees, hills torn apart from their bases, and then their bases torn apart from the earth, revealing the nothingness beneath them. The Lightkeep and the Temple of Light, the graveyard and all the bodies that were buried with it, went all up into the air until they disappeared into the skies. There was even no more battlefield. Nearly everything was black. Only Isabella and the Lightkeepers that remained alive on a little patch of dirt were not taken by the storm. Isabella's sword still held deep in the Dark Lord's armor, but there was nothing left of him but dust at this point. She rose up. No words were spoken. No explanation was given. Suddenly, everything went black. A message then appeared. You have been disconnected from the server. The game was over. Josh, dear Josh, I hope I made you proud. Your enemies lie dead. Your demons have been defeated. May you rest in peace, my beloved son and daughter.